Hello, my name is Nina, and my sister tried to have me killed while I was in a coma. I heard her say it. Finish her, she's already weak. She didn't know I was awake. She didn't know I heard everything. The doctor? He nodded. Just nodded. They thought I couldn't fight back. They thought silence meant surrender. But they forgot something. When you wake up to betrayal, you don't cry. You calculate. How did it get that far? How does a family member smile at you while signing away your life with a pen? And what would you do if the people who were supposed to protect you wanted you gone? They said it so casually, like they were discussing a weather report or a change in hospital protocol. Finish her. She's already weak. The words sliced through the sterile silence like a razor, but it wasn't the doctor's voice that made my stomach twist. It was hers, my sister's. I lay there, still, unmoving, my mind clawing its way out of the fog as if some deeper instinct knew I needed to be awake for this moment. My body remained paralyzed, pinned under tubes and monitors, but inside, I was screaming. Vera, the same sister who used to braid my hair and tuck me in when I was little, the same woman who hugged me in the ICU the night before the surgery, telling me, "You'll be okay, Nina. I've got you." That voice, steady, sweet, surgical, had just ordered my death like a room service request. I didn't flinch, not even a flicker, and that might have saved my life. "I can adjust the dosages," the doctor muttered. His voice wasn't surprised, only cautious. "Don't be stupid," Vera hissed. "She just signed the papers. She gave me full authority, her will, her rights, everything. If she slips now, no one questions it, no lawsuits, no mistakes." "Slips," she said, like I was a puddle on a hospital floor. Like I wasn't someone who'd once held her hand at our mother's funeral. They thought I was unconscious. Maybe I was supposed to be. But somewhere in my brain, maybe by luck, maybe by survival instinct, something refused to shut off. My eyes stayed closed, my breathing even, my rage, wide awake. It was the kind of moment people imagine only happens in movies. But there was nothing cinematic about hearing your own sister plot to end your life with a man who took an oath to protect it. There was only the dull beep of the heart monitor and the heavy realization that if I reacted, even slightly, they'd finish what they'd started. So I lay still. I became stone. And I listened. Vera's heels clicked out of the room like nothing had happened, like she didn't just mark me for death. The doctor lingered. He checked my IV, stared at my face a moment too long. I kept my expression blank, like a wax doll. His fingers hovered over the machine. Then he left. As the door clicked shut, I wanted to scream, to sit up, to tear the wires from my skin and run. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not without a plan. My body was still too weak, and I had no allies, just silence. And silence, I knew, could be a powerful thing if used right. So I let them believe I was as helpless as they wanted me to be. The next time Vera came in, she was carrying tulips, white ones, like something you'd place on a grave. Her perfume arrived first, faint rose and something sharper, more artificial. Her voice followed. "Oh, Nina," she cooed. "You gave us quite a scare." She brushed my hair back with fingers that used to feel like comfort. Now they felt like poison. A nurse popped her head in, smiling at the sight. "Your sister's been here all night," the nurse said to me, though I wasn't responding. "She's amazing." Vera gave a modest nod, placing the flowers beside my bed. She leaned close, whispering against my temple. "You're going to rest now, right?" "No more surprises." My stomach turned, but I didn't react. That was the only power I had left in that moment. My stillness. As she sat beside me, humming a lullaby from our childhood, my mind started sorting through details like puzzle pieces, her access to my medical records, the power of attorney form I'd supposedly signed, the way the doctor didn't hesitate. This wasn't a spontaneous betrayal. This was a plan, and I'd walked right into it. I tried to remember when things shifted. Was it when Dad passed and named me executor of his estate? Or when I told her I'd be moving back to Asheville to care for Mom? Vera had always been the golden child, charming, capable, public. I was the quiet one, the sensitive sister. easy to ignore, easier to erase. That night, with the hospital humming around me, I made a choice. I wasn't going to tell anyone what I'd heard. Not yet. No one would believe me anyway. The doctors respected her. The nurses adored her. The world already had its narrative, and I was cast in the role of the fragile one. But I wasn't fragile anymore. I was aware, awake, and I was going to use every ounce of that to my advantage. I closed my eyes tighter and let the monitor beep lull me into focus. I remembered something Dad once said when I was little and upset over a classmate spreading rumors. You don't shout the truth, sweetheart. You build it one stone at a time, and when it's ready, you drop it on their heads. This was my first stone. Vera had no idea I'd heard her. She didn't see the storm I was preparing behind closed eyelids and a breathing tube. As the hours passed, the light changed through the window. Nurses came and went. Vera reappeared occasionally, always with the right expression, the right words, the perfect lies. But she never once looked afraid. She thought she'd won. She was wrong. The silence she mistook for weakness. It was my strategy. I began memorizing everything. The way she tilted her head when she spoke to staff, how she avoided my eyes too long, the inflection in her voice when she called me sweetheart. All of it went into the vault I was building behind my silence. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I waited. Because survival wasn't about strength. It was about knowing when to stay still and when to strike. And when I finally opened my eyes, it wouldn't be to say, thank you. It would be to bury her with her own words. Finish her. She's already weak. That was the first nail in her coffin, and she didn't even know it. I opened my eyes slowly the next morning, not out of shock or panic, but with the deliberate restraint of someone who knew she was being watched. The overhead lights were already on, diffused through the privacy curtain beside me. A faint beeping from the monitor near my head set the rhythm of my breath, steady and slow, as it had all night. But this time, I wasn't pretending. I blinked once, twice, just enough to let the sensors register activity. Within seconds, I heard hurried footsteps and a gasp that was too performative to be genuine. Nina! Vera's voice cracked with emotion. She was already at my side, clutching my hand as if I'd risen from the dead. Oh my God, she's awake! Get Dr. Harris! She leaned over, eyes glistening with practiced tears, brushing my cheek with the back of her hand like some overdone soap opera heroine. You're back, she whispered. Thank God. You scared us all to death. I barely moved. My lips parted just enough to form the simplest response. What happened? It wasn't confusion. It was a test. I wanted to see how they'd spin it. Vera gave me a tight smile. You had a complication after the surgery, but you're safe now. I stayed the whole time. You'll be fine. Just rest. Her voice dropped to a hush as the door swung open and Dr. Harris walked in, clipboard in hand, already playing his part. Miraculous, he murmured, flipping through papers without looking at me. We were hopeful. It's good to see you responsive, Nina. The man who stood over me days ago, complicit in the decision to end my life, was now documenting my recovery like it was a medical triumph. I didn't say anything more. Just let them talk. Let them build their version of the truth while I collected mine. Later that afternoon, a hospital administrator came by. She was polite, overly so, with that kind of HR sweetness you hear when people are about to discuss something uncomfortable but for your benefit. I just need to verify a few things with you, she began, setting a folder on the rolling table beside my bed. You signed these a few weeks ago, right? I frowned, pretending to squint. I don't remember. Advanced directives, health proxy, temporary estate reassignment forms, standard things. I reached for the folder slowly, letting my fingers shake just enough to seem weak. Inside were forms bearing my name, my signature, but I hadn't signed anything. Not while I was conscious. Someone had forged my hand. There was a DNR order with a date from the second day of my coma, a transfer of estate control to Vera for the duration of medical incapacity. Even a note that I'd waived the right to independent counsel due to mental distress. Mental distress. I nodded slowly, closed the folder, and thanked her. She looked relieved, mistaking my silence for agreement. She walked away thinking she'd done her job. What she'd really done was hand me proof. That night, Vera returned with a stuffed bear, the same kind she gave me when I was 7 and cried after breaking my arm. The gesture was perfectly timed, sweet and subtle, an object meant to soothe and manipulate. "I know how overwhelming this must be," she said, sitting beside me. "The nurses said you've been quiet. That's okay. You don't need to push yourself." She reached up to adjust my pillow like a loving sister, but I caught her watching me out of the corner of her eye. Not with concern, she was gauging whether I'd ask questions, whether I'd remember. "I'm fine," I said softly. "Just tired." "Of course." She smiled, brushing hair from my face. "That's to be expected. You've always been sensitive. Remember college, when you dropped that class because the professor raised his voice?" I remembered the professor. He'd screamed at another student, not me, but the narrative Vera wove didn't need to be accurate, just believable. Later, I overheard a nurse in the hallway whisper, "Chart says history of emotional episodes. Makes sense, right?" There it was, the slow, careful rewrite of my identity. The myth of fragility, strategically placed into my medical file like a viral seed meant to bloom into discredit. I closed my eyes and recalled the last time I saw a therapist, years ago, after Mom passed. It had been one session, a short, honest conversation about grief. Nothing unstable. But Vera must have remembered that too, just twisted it to fit her story. Now, I was being treated like glass. Nurses spoke to me in soft, measured tones. Doctors hesitated before asking questions, like they were afraid I'd shatter. Every glance carried a silent question. Is she okay? Is she unstable? I smiled when I needed to, said thank you when appropriate. But inside, I was storing every word, every glance, every fake smile. The bear Vera gave me sat on the chair near the window. I stared at it for a long time that evening. It looked innocent, familiar, but so did she. Later that night, I asked a nurse casually, "Could I see my mail? Or who's listed as my insurance contact?" She gave me an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, Ms. Selwyn took care of all that while you were out. She's still listed as your primary contact." That was it. That was the answer I needed. I nodded, thanked her, and waited for the room to grow dark. When the shift changed, I asked to speak to the hospital's patient advocate privately. She never came. The next day, I asked again. Same result. By the third day, I stopped asking. Instead, I requested a copy of my records. A nurse gave me a dismissive look, but eventually complied. She handed over a stack of paperwork that felt heavier than it looked. Buried within, I found it, the same forged signature from the folder the administrator showed me. My name written with that slightly too perfect loop. Vera always did practice her cursive better than me. I stared at the signature for a long time, then slid it into the drawer beside my bed. If she wanted to erase me, she should have used permanent ink. Instead, she gave me something to hold on to. That night, I sat in silence, the bear resting on my lap, the signature folded in my hand. "You wrote me off," I whispered, my voice barely audible. But I just picked up the pen. When I watched the little red light blink from the stuffed bear's eye that night, it wasn't just relief. It was validation. The lie was recorded. The act was caught. Vera had walked straight into my trap, and for the first time since I woke up, I felt like I'd taken something back. The next morning was quiet. Too quiet. The kind that makes your skin itch because you know something's coming. I didn't push the call button. I didn't ask for extra water or fuss with the tray of untouched breakfast. I waited, and at 9:12 a.m., like clockwork, she walked in. She wore beige that day, probably thinking it softened her, made her look warm and reasonable. The folder in her hand, though, that told me otherwise. Thick, crisp manila with a little gold clip and a label in her handwriting. Family mediation proposal. I couldn't help the small smile that twitched at the corner of my mouth. She was getting nervous. Good. "Morning," she said brightly, setting the folder down as if she were delivering muffins, not ultimatums. "I didn't want to overwhelm you yesterday, but I think it's time we talked through some next steps." "Next steps?" I echoed softly, playing the game. Yes, she said, like I was 5 and she was explaining why bedtime mattered. Now that you're awake, I thought we could just simplify things. For the family. For your peace of mind. She opened the folder and slid a few pages out, spreading them on the tray beside me. There's no pressure, but if you feel comfortable signing, it just helps clarify things. You'd be stepping back from anything legal, just letting the estate stuff pass through me. And there's a short statement. Just saying everything during your coma was a misunderstanding. She tilted her head like she was offering a gift. No one's looking for drama, Nina. This just keeps things easy. I nodded slowly. Give me a day to think. Her eyes lit up like I'd handed her the keys to the kingdom. Of course. Take your time. It's all up to you. After she left, I stared at the folder. Then I turned on my recorder and whispered, Day 1. She thinks I'm still soft. That night, I slid the recorder into the pocket of my hospital gown and asked the nurse if I could have a few minutes with my sister. No visitors, no interruptions, just sisterly time. Vera showed up before the request even made it across the floor. She looked suspicious, but her smile didn't falter. You wanted to talk? I did, I replied, voice barely above a murmur. About Dad. That was her weak spot. Our father. The man who had seen through her, even when he didn't always call her out on it. She sat down cautiously, and the second her fingers touched the railing of my bed, the recorder picked it up. You know, he left everything to me because he didn't trust you, she said suddenly, her voice like steel under velvet. You were never the strong one, Nina. You were the one we all had to cover for. She leaned in a little closer. You think they'll believe your word over mine? You can barely sit up. I didn't flinch. I didn't respond. I just let her talk, and she did. Freely. Dad gave you too much credit. You cracked under pressure every time. I kept this family together. I kept you from becoming a total embarrassment. I watched her face. Watched the way her lips curled with superiority, the way she glanced around as if someone might be eavesdropping. No one needed to. The recorder under my pillow had captured every word. After she left, I labeled the file. Day 1, mask slipping. The next day, I got to work. I asked for my iPad, claiming I wanted to journal. The nurse brought it in with a smile, not realizing it was more than a diary. It was a logbook, every visit, every nurse's name, every side-eye, every statement Vera made that contradicted herself. All of it, time-stamped. I hid a backup recorder in the water bottle lid. Another beneath the drawer lip of the side table. I'd become a one-woman surveillance operation, and the hospital didn't even know it. In the afternoon, Vera brought more flowers. She gave me a hug, told the staff I was so much stronger today, and slipped a stuffed bear into my lap again. Just like when we were kids, she said. I looked her dead in the eye. Yeah, just like back then. That night, I stared at the bear, and I remembered. I was 9. Vera was 14. Dad had a jar of quarters he kept on the hallway shelf. He called it his ice cream fund. One day, it was half empty. I told him I'd seen Vera near it, hand in the jar. She cried first, sobbed, said I was lying, said I'd always been jealous. And he believed her. She got a second scoop of Rocky Road that night. I got grounded. That was the first time I realized truth didn't matter as much as timing. And Vera? She'd always been early to the lie. Now, decades later, I watched her using the same tactics, only more polished. Same tears, same manipulations, different stakes. Only this time, I had the receipts. 2 days later, she showed up with a notary. I'd been given a mild sedative that morning for a scan. Vera must have known. She waited until I was groggy, then came in smiling. Hey, sweetie, we're just going to get a few things finalized. Easy stuff. You won't even have to read it. I blinked slowly, nodding like a sleepy child. She guided my hand to a pen, the notary quiet and awkward beside her. My hand trembled as I held the pen, not from weakness, but from barely contained rage, and just before my name touched the page, I whispered, "Smile for the mic." Her hand froze. She looked up at me, blinking. What? I smiled, not sweetly. Nothing. She left shortly after that. That night, I listened to the recording. Every word, every breath, every lie. The bear's button eye blinked red once, twice. Solid. Proof. The bear's eye stopped blinking just as the sun began to creep through the blinds. I hadn't slept, not really. My body was tired, sure, but my mind was sharp, alert, calculating. I'd caught Vera in a lie, and the proof now lived in more than just my memory. That little red light meant her carefully crafted mask had slipped, and I had the footage to prove it. Still, proof wasn't power, not yet. Around 9 o'clock that morning, I scrolled through my dad's old contacts on my iPad. Most of the names were familiar, old friends, lawyers, family friends who'd stopped calling after the funeral. One name, though, stuck out like a whisper from a past life, Callan Pierce. He'd been Dad's estate attorney, quiet, sharp, and fiercely loyal to my father. I clicked his number, not knowing if it still worked or if he'd even take the call. He answered on the third ring. "Pierce Legal," came a deep, neutral voice. "Callan, it's Nina Rowan," I said, and waited for the pause. It came. There was a silence thick enough to cut. Then, "That's not possible." I smiled slightly. It didn't work. Another pause. Then, "Where are you?" I explained briefly, told him I couldn't talk freely, but needed to see him, quietly, privately. He agreed, setting up a meeting the next day under the guise of reviewing insurance documentation for the hospital. The following afternoon, I was wheeled into the private consultation room next to the hospital's legal wing. Callan was already there, seated at the far end of the polished table, briefcase in front of him. He stood when he saw me, visibly shaken. "I thought you were—" "I know," I said, voice calm. "They wanted you to think that." He exhaled, his hands trembling slightly. "Nina, what the hell is going on? I need to know what my father really left behind, before Vera got to it." Callan opened the briefcase slowly, pulling out a sealed envelope, handwritten, dated 6 months before Dad passed. "He made me promise to only give this to you directly, said you'd know when it was time." My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside were 2 items, a signed notarized will naming me sole beneficiary of his personal trust, and handwritten instructions that simply read, "For when the silence becomes your only ally." I stared at the paper, my chest tightening, not with grief, but something closer to relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining all of this. Dad had known Vera might try something. He had tried to protect me, even from the grave. "People will fight hardest for what they think they deserve," he once told me, "not what they've earned." That line echoed in my mind as I folded the document back into the envelope. I turned to Callan. "Can we do it?" He nodded. "Absolutely, but we'll need to move fast. Vera's probably moved assets, or at least tried." "I need a freeze, full estate lock. She forged my name on documents while I was in a coma. She's misused access, redirected accounts, everything." "I'll start it today," he said, already reaching for his phone. "Trust me, this isn't my first family betrayal rodeo." By the time I was wheeled back to my room, I had something Vera never expected me to have: leverage. The next day, around noon, she stormed into the hospital room, face flushed and posture unusually stiff. "You froze the estate," she snapped, not even pretending to be composed anymore. "Without even calling me? What gives you the right?" I looked up from my tray calmly. "The name on the will." She blinked. "That's a draft. Dad never signed that." "He did," I said quietly. "And it's been notarized, recorded, witnessed." She stepped closer, voice dropping to that hissing tone she used as a teenager when she didn't get her way. "You think this makes you smart? You think this makes you safe?" "For the first time in weeks," I replied. "Yes, I do." She scoffed. "They're going to laugh at you in court. You're unstable, Nina. You can barely get through a conversation without flinching." "That's funny," I said, reaching under my blanket and pulling out my iPad. "Because you seem to have no problem talking when you think no one's recording." Her jaw twitched. "You wouldn't dare." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. 2 days later, she tried a different approach. She called for a family dinner in the hospital's rehab garden, told the staff it was about rebuilding trust, Even brought chicken salad sandwiches from the deli we used to go to after church. We sat on the patio under string lights while she poured iced tea and made small talk about Mom's old hydrangeas. Anyone watching would have seen two sisters healing old wounds. But under the table, I had my recorder going again. "You're being unreasonable," Vera said softly between bites. "This doesn't have to be a war. I'm just trying to protect what's best for the family." "And you think that's you?" I asked. "I've been holding this family together for years. You think people really want you in charge?" I stared at her for a long moment. "No. I think they just don't know the truth yet." Later that evening, I returned to my room, sorted the recordings, filed the latest one under Garden Chat, Threats Under Tea. I didn't sleep that night either, but it wasn't from fear this time, it was anticipation. The next morning, I asked the nurse to wheel me down to the administrative offices. When I got there, I asked to speak with Vera's assistant. The woman hesitated at first, but eventually led me to her office. Vera wasn't there. I stepped inside, placed a framed photo of Dad on her desk, then set down a folder listing the accounts now frozen. At the bottom, I'd written in black ink, "This is me playing nice." She found it 2 hours later and came to my room just before lunch. "You're bluffing," she said, trying to laugh. But her hands were clenched at her sides. I met her gaze. "Keep playing. I'll start revealing," she smirked. "You've always been dramatic." "Maybe. But at least I'm not a fraud." For the first time, her smile didn't reach her eyes. "She called me a shadow once." "Good. Shadows know where the cracks are." After slipping the flash drive into Callan's envelope and sealing it shut with tape, I stared at it for a long moment before handing it to the courier. "If anything happens to me," I told the delivery woman, "make sure he opens this first." She gave a polite nod, not asking questions, and tucked it into her pouch before walking out the room. I watched her go, feeling the weight in my chest ease slightly. For the first time, I had a contingency plan. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my name being said on television. It took me a second to register it. The small TV mounted in the upper corner of the hospital room had been left on overnight, tuned to the local morning show. There she was, Vera, hair curled just so. That soft blue sweater she always wore when she wanted to look trustworthy. Even her makeup was warmer, like she was trying to look motherly. "She's recovering slowly," she told the reporter, eyes glassy. "But we're just grateful she's here. It was touch and go for a while." A pause. A gentle sigh. I stayed with her most nights, held her hand. I prayed every night that she'd wake up. And then, on cue, she wiped a tear. "God heard me," she whispered. I sat there, fists clenched under the sheets. The nurse walked in a few minutes later to check my vitals and glanced up at the screen. "Your sister's something else," she said with admiration. "A real rock. I don't know how she does it all." I didn't respond. What would I have said? She's been plotting my death and laundering my inheritance? Instead, I smiled faintly and let the nurse do her routine. As soon as she left, I reached for my iPad and pulled up the hospital staff directory. I'd been meaning to double-check some information about Dr. Harris, my attending physician. Something about him never sat right with me. Too compliant, too ready to nod along to whatever Vera said. I found his bio, scanned through the education section, and stopped at the line that read, University of North Carolina, class of 2001. Same as Vera. A quick social media search confirmed it. They were college roommates, shared trips, vacations, a couple of blurry photos at a beach house, drinks in hand, arms around each other. So that was it. The man responsible for adjusting my medication, for keeping me under longer than needed, for updating files without question, wasn't just her colleague. He was her friend. I wasn't paranoid. I was surrounded. That afternoon, I asked the nurse to help me schedule a reconciliation moment with my sister in the garden. Said I wanted peace, closure. She smiled and said, "That's the spirit, honey." By sunset, they had wheeled me out onto the small patio space behind the east wing. Vera arrived 20 minutes later, dressed like she was headed to Sunday service. Soft lavender dress, matching scarf, even pearls. She greeted the nurses like they were her personal friends, giving one of them a bag of pastries she'd picked up for the staff. She walked over to me, smiling as if this were just another day. "I heard you wanted to talk," she said, voice light. "I did," I replied, my tone even. We sat across from one another, the ivy-covered trellis casting shadows across the table. I let the silence linger for a bit before I spoke. "This is your one chance, Vera," I said softly, keeping my gaze steady. "Step back. Walk away from the estate, the press, the concerned sister routine. Just go." Her smile didn't budge. "Excuse me?" "I have the recordings," I continued. "The forgeries, Dad's actual will. I have every thread you've tried to pull, documented and backed up in multiple places." She blinked, slowly, then let out a short laugh. "No one's going to believe a woman who's been in and out of sedation and hasn't been seen in public in over a month." I raised an eyebrow. "You think the truth needs a stage?" She leaned in slightly. "You're always 2 steps behind, Nina. It's exhausting." "And yet you're the one sweating," I said, pointing to the beads glistening on her temple. Her smile faltered for half a second. "You really think you're going to take everything Dad left behind?" she hissed, no longer pretending. "You couldn't manage a checkbook in college. You cried when your cat died. You are not equipped for real life." I sat back, folding my hands calmly. "You've spent your whole life silencing me, but now, I'm the story you can't edit." She stood up, too quickly, knocking the metal chair slightly out of place. The nurse looked over from the station a few yards away. Vera regained her composure almost immediately, smoothing her skirt. She smiled at the nurse. "Thank you so much for setting this up. We just needed a little time to reconnect." I smiled too. It was enlightening. Vera leaned down as if to hug me and whispered, "You'll regret this." I whispered back, "You just gave me your next headline." Later that evening, I returned to my room and pulled up my email. I uploaded every single audio file, every image of the forged signatures, every message she ever sent me about keeping things quiet. I compiled it into a zip file and encrypted it. Then I attached it to an email addressed to Callan, labeled, "Open if I disappear." I typed a short message. "If anything happens, this is where the fire starts." I hit send. Then I deleted every local copy off my devices. I closed the iPad, leaned back against my pillow, and looked out the window. I didn't feel fear. I felt ready. She thought I'd play fair, but this time, I brought receipts. It had been less than 24 hours since I uploaded everything to Callan and deleted all my local copies. I should have felt secure, strong, even. But instead, there was a simmering heat in my chest that kept me wide awake. Not anxiety, not fear. Rage, and it flared hotter when Dolores, the night nurse, stopped at my bedside around 2 a.m. to check vitals. Her hand lingered on the monitor, brow furrowing. She looked around, leaned in closer, and whispered, "Your monitor was manually paused at 2:11 this morning, reset itself automatically after 90 seconds. Probably nothing. But that doesn't just happen, sugar." I blinked slowly, trying not to react too visibly. "Someone turned it off?" Dolores didn't answer right away. She glanced at the hallway before meeting my eyes. "Could have been a mistake. Or someone testing the limits." She patted my arm. "But you didn't hear that from me." She walked away like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I lay in that bed, heart pounding. Not from terror, but fury so cold it burned. Someone tried to stop my heart. And if it weren't for a system reset, I might have never known. I waited until the hallway quieted, then sat up slowly, my body still aching, but my focus sharpened. I reached for my tablet, opened the medical records portal I'd hacked into days earlier, and started digging. Vitals, medication, order logs. Buried within it was exactly what I feared. A prescription for Zeltraxin. Not common, not for coma patients, not approved for neurological recovery. It was a sedative used primarily in psychiatric care, something that dulled awareness and slowed brain function just enough to keep a patient compliant. It had been ordered 3 times, all under Dr. Harris's login. My fingers hovered over the screen as I processed the betrayal. He knew what this was. Vera knew what this was, and someone had tried to use it to silence me. Again. My hands didn't shake as I took screenshots. I opened an incognito browser and pulled up the State Medical Board's whistleblower site, typed, "Review patient number 1 in 97's records from Asheville General, specifically vitals on April 16th and medication administered during coma recovery." Attach the drug log, hit send. Then I opened a blank email, wrote a second message, this time to the hospital's ethics committee. Subject line, "The patient isn't unstable, her doctor is." I signed it with a pseudonym, closed the tablet, sat back, and breathed. The next morning, Vera arrived in a pantsuit and pearls like she was running for office. Her lawyer trailed behind her, young, smug, trying hard not to look like he was sweating. They didn't ask permission to enter. They just walked in like they owned the room. Vera barely gave me a chance to speak. "You've been making some wild accusations," she started, voice steady, eyes sharp. "And frankly, it's becoming a liability. I'm here to give you one last chance to retract." I looked at her, then at the lawyer, then back at her. "If you touch my file again," I said evenly, "your badge will read former administrator." The room went still. Vera's jaw tightened. The lawyer tried to smile, but it looked more like a grimace. "You're bluffing," Vera said. I leaned forward. "Am I?" I turned the tablet around, pulled up the drug log with her login. "Would you like to explain this dosage of Zeltraxin during my coma recovery? Or maybe why your best friend Dr. Harris forgot to disclose his conflict of interest?" Her face didn't change right away, but her lawyer did. His posture straightened. His eyes scanned the screen quickly. "I think we need a moment," he muttered to her. Vera didn't move. Just stared at me, eyes burning, like she was trying to rewrite reality by sheer will. "Tick-tock," I whispered. They left, and I didn't flinch until the door clicked shut. That afternoon, I asked Dolores to help me walk to the nurse's station. She gave me a skeptical look, but obliged. With one hand gripping the walker and the other holding on to determination, I made it down the hallway and leaned over the counter. "If anyone approaches my room or my monitor without proper ID, I want security paged immediately." Dolores nodded. "Already flagged it, honey." I looked her in the eye. "Don't hesitate. Not again." She nodded once more, then turned back to her work. On the slow walk back, I passed Dr. Harris in the hallway. He had the nerve to smile and say, "Glad to see you up and about." I stopped in my tracks. "Tell me, doctor," I said, loud enough for a nurse nearby to hear. "Is Zeltraxin standard for someone recovering from a coma?" His smile faltered. "I'll take that as a no," I said, then continued walking. Back in my room, I sat down, heart thudding from exertion. But I wasn't tired. I was ready. I opened my journal and wrote one sentence across the page in capital letters. I warned her. Now I'm coming for everything. I could hear the hum of the ceiling light, steady and low, as if the hospital itself was holding its breath. The shift had just changed. It was late enough that the halls were empty, early enough that the world hadn't woken up, and just like Vera, the system moved quietly when it wanted to erase something. The door creaked open. A man in a blazer, not a white coat, stepped in with a clipboard. "Good morning, Ms. Rowan," he said with rehearsed ease. "I'm Dr. Brantley. I've been asked to do a psychological wellness check. Just routine, nothing formal." I didn't flinch. "By whose request?" "Concerned family," he replied smoothly, without blinking. "You know how it is. These things can get overwhelming." He asked if he could sit. I nodded. He didn't take out a pen or notes, just asked questions that sounded harmless at first. "Have you been sleeping? Do you feel people are watching you? Do you sometimes feel like your family is out to get you?" Every word had a trap in it. I could almost hear Vera's voice beneath his, coaching him on what to fish for. I stayed calm. I spoke clearly. Slowly. Kept my eyes on his the entire time. And in my mind, I repeated, "This is not about my sanity. This is about her fear." After 20 minutes, he closed his folder. "Thank you for your time, Nina." I didn't smile. Be honest in your report. You know what this is. He hesitated for the first time, then gave a stiff nod and left. 2 hours later, Callan showed up with a small cardboard box. Straight from the attic of your childhood home, he said, setting it gently on the table beside my bed. Your mother had labeled it, for Nina, personal. The sight of her handwriting made something shift inside me. I opened it carefully, expecting photos or old cards. Instead, on top of the pile, wrapped in a handkerchief, was a journal. I knew that cover, the maroon leather. Mom had written in it most nights after she made tea. She never let us read it. I opened to the middle, flipping through pages, when one sentence jumped out at me like a scream in a church. Vera's anger scares me. She resents Nina's softness, and it leaks from her smile. I kept reading. She punishes Nina for being loved. I used to think it would pass. It hasn't. I stopped there. I didn't need more. The ache that bloomed in my chest wasn't just grief. It was clarity. This didn't start in the hospital. It didn't start with Dad's will or with forged signatures. It started in the hallway of our childhood home, in the way Vera took credit for things I did, in the way she always cried first, always manipulated faster, always took more. I remembered a day when I was 10 and she was 15. I'd broken a dish. She had dared me to carry it with wet hands. When it shattered, she screamed that I had thrown it at her. Mom separated us, made us sit in silence across the living room. Vera glared at me the entire time, a smile stretching across her face. That same smile she wears now, publicly polished, privately poisonous. I held the journal to my chest, whispering, "Thank you, Mom." The next morning, a new nurse came into the room. Her badge said temp, and she avoided my eyes. Something about her presence didn't sit right. I pressed the call button and asked Dolores, the night nurse, to switch her out. 10 minutes later, a hospital administrator arrived with a paper in hand. Court-mandated mental health evaluation, she announced. Filed yesterday. I stared at the paper, noting the signature. Vera Selwyn. Vera was trying to institutionalize me, have me labeled unfit, have me committed, legally silenced. The administrator left me with the paper, saying the psychiatrist would return that afternoon. I waited until she was gone, then called Callan. She's pushing me into a corner, I said, but I'm ready. Do you want me there when the evaluation happens? He asked. No, I said. I want you there after. Around 3:00 p.m., the same psychiatrist, Dr. Brantley, returned. This time I met him at the door. I brought something for you to consider, I said, handing him a folder labeled, History You Forgot I Remembered. Inside was a copy of Mom's journal entry, a list of Vera's recent actions, a detailed account of Dr. Harris's connections and conflict of interest, a copy of the medication order logs. He read silently, mouth tightening. I won't answer a single question, I told him. Not until you read that, twice. We sat in silence for 20 minutes. When he finally spoke, it was only to say, You're not the one I'm concerned about. Later that evening, I forwarded everything to the state medical board, then the legal aid nonprofit, then the hospital ethics committee. Each email anonymous, each filled with scans, reports, and connections. No more hiding, no more silence. This wasn't personal anymore. This was systemic. When Callan returned the next day, I handed him a list of everyone Vera had manipulated and every contact I wanted in the room. I'm ready, I said. He blinked. For what? For the mediation, I said, voice steady. The truth's no longer my secret to carry. That evening, as I stared at the ceiling tiles, I didn't feel afraid. I felt precise. She used my silence as her shield. Now I'm turning it into a sword. The sound of my boots on the polished floor echoed a rhythm that matched the beat of my pulse. Steady, resolute. I hadn't worn heels in months, but I made sure I did today. There's something about hearing yourself walk into a room that makes you remember who you are. And this morning, I needed no reminders. We met in a neutral conference room inside Callan's office downtown, the kind of place with too clean carpet and furniture designed to make you feel civilized, no matter how messy things were about to get. Callan sat to my left, folders neatly stacked in front of him, the manila one on top labeled in black ink. Unsealed Truths. My name was printed underneath it in small caps. He didn't look nervous, just focused. Across the table, Vera adjusted her blazer like she was preparing for a press release. Her pearl earrings caught the light, and her lipstick was a little too perfect, like she'd applied it 10 times before leaving the house. Next to her, her lawyer tapped on his tablet, avoiding eye contact. 2 extended family members were present, Dad's cousin Miriam and Uncle Ross. They weren't there to take sides. They were there because I requested witnesses who knew both of us, people who'd remember the little girls we used to be. Vera leaned forward, folding her hands delicately over the table. "Nina," she began, voice smooth as polished glass, "whatever misunderstanding has happened, I want you to know I forgive you. Truly. Let's put this behind us." Callan opened the top folder, tapped the label gently, then looked at me. I met Vera's eyes. "Let's begin where this really started." She blinked. "Excuse me?" I reached inside the folder and took out the small, slim recorder, clicked play. Her voice filled the room. "You should have just stayed asleep, Nina. We were doing fine without you." The silence that followed was brutal. You could hear the blood rush in people's ears. Miriam shifted uncomfortably. Uncle Ross leaned back in his chair, arms crossed tightly over his chest. Vera's smile cracked for the first time in months. "I don't recall," she started, but Callan raised a hand. "Let her finish," he said flatly. I didn't speak. I just pressed another button. "I'm the only reason this family hasn't fallen apart," her voice continued. "Dad trusted me because you were too fragile to manage anything. I had no choice." The room remained frozen. I could see the flicker of realization in their eyes, the way Miriam turned slightly toward me, the way Ross no longer looked at Vera at all. When the audio stopped, I clicked it off, slid the device across the table, and began setting down copies of documentation. "Here is the original will," I said, signed and notarized, leaving me full control of Dad's trust. A second folder. "Here is the prescription log from the hospital, showing sedatives ordered during my coma, medications not standard for neurological recovery." A third folder. "Here's a statement from the nurse who caught the monitor being shut off at 2:11 a.m. And finally, I opened the last folder. "This," I said, laying out several pages, "is a scanned copy of Mom's journal. The pages where she documents Vera's behavior going back to when we were children." Vera didn't speak, but her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. I looked at the 2 relatives across from me. "If this happened to you, if your sister tried to erase you, take what your parents meant for you, rewrite who you are, what would you have done?" Miriam's eyes filled with something that looked very close to regret. Ross gave a single nod, subtle but real. I turned to Callan. "Execute the paperwork." He pulled out the final document and passed it to Vera's lawyer. "This is a legal directive from Nina Rowan," he began. "Effective immediately, she reclaims full control of the family estate, all financial and legal access is transferred back to her name, and Vera Selwyn's rights to medical decisions, financial accounts, and property access are fully revoked." Vera's lawyer cleared his throat. "We'll need time to review." "You have 48 hours, I said, "or I go public." Everything goes to the press, the hospital board, and the medical ethics committee." Vera finally spoke. "You think this makes you strong?" I leaned in. "I know it does." I reached for the pen, signed the last page with a steady hand, and passed it back to Callan. "You don't get to write me off," I said quietly, "and still sign my future." We adjourned not long after. Miriam and Ross didn't say much when they left, but they hugged me. The kind of hug you get from people who didn't realize how long you'd been drowning. Vera lingered. As I gathered my things, she approached me. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice softer now. "Just us?" I looked up at her, really looked at her, for the first time in weeks. She was still beautiful, still polished, but something in her face had cracked. Not her makeup, her certainty. The quiet, cold confidence that she always wore like armor had split just enough to show panic underneath. I slung my bag over my shoulder and shook my head. You've already said enough. I walked out before she could respond, the door clicking shut behind me. I didn't need her to fall apart. I just needed her to stop pretending I didn't matter. The courtroom buzzed just enough to remind me why I didn't step inside. I stood across the street, behind the tinted windows of Callan's parked SUV, watching people file in and out of the county courthouse. Vera's civil hearing had just wrapped. It was a non-event. Dismissed, no charges filed, no public trial. Just paperwork folded into other paperwork. Reporters stood outside anyway, holding empty notepads and microphones that picked up nothing worth airing. A few murmured to each other, looking at their phones. One glanced toward the sidewalk where I stood. But none of them recognized me. Good. I didn't need a judge to say Vera was guilty. She did that herself the moment she looked away from me, when she chose image over blood, reputation over truth. As the crowd outside the courthouse began to thin, I exhaled slowly, nodded at Callan in the driver's seat, and leaned back. Home? He asked. Please. The drive to my little bookstore took less than 20 minutes. I watched as the bustle of the city gave way to trees and sidewalks that knew me better than I knew myself. Asheville had its flaws, but it had always cradled its secrets well. Mine were now shelved, documented, buried only in the sense that they no longer needed to be carried. A month after the mediation, I withdrew half of what was left in my father's estate and started the Unheard No More Foundation. Not because I wanted to be seen as a survivor, but because I knew there were other women, like me, who had been talked over, written off, labeled too sensitive while their lives were quietly dismantled. We didn't need slogans. We needed documentation. The foundation wasn't flashy. It didn't host galas or take out ads. It helped women file anonymous legal statements, provided emotional coaching for depositions, connected survivors of financial, legal, and familial abuse with quiet, powerful resources. Our first newsletter opened with a single sentence. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, you still have a name. One afternoon in early October, I sat behind the front counter of the shop, scanning through an email from a woman in Indiana who wrote, "Your file saved me from going back." I read it twice, then leaned back in my chair, surrounded by shelves that smelled of paper and pine, and let the quiet fill me up. I had created a space that didn't need to prove anything. It just existed, like me. On Thursdays, I ran writing workshops for teen girls. I didn't call it therapy, but I watched their posture shift, their hands stop trembling when they spoke aloud something they'd never told anyone else. Last week, one of them, Kayla, 16, whip-smart and too guarded for her age, hugged me after class. "You don't sound weak at all," she whispered into my shoulder. I smiled. "I'm not." I no longer replayed the worst days. I didn't check my rearview mirror when I walked home. But I did stop once, in late November, at a grocery store in a town 1 hour north. I hadn't planned to. I was driving back from a foundation event and needed water and Tylenol. I saw her in the frozen foods aisle, hair tied back, plain sweatshirt. She was alone, scanning coupons with a small basket at her side. No entourage, no designer bag. Vera. She hadn't seen me. I watched for a moment, long enough to register the smallness of her world now. She reached for a discount meal, looked at the price again, and put it back. I turned and walked away. No words, no standoff. She didn't deserve my confrontation. She already lived in the sentence she'd carved for herself. A week later, I walked through the hospital's east wing. They'd finished renovations. New tiles. New lights. Everything looked brighter. But I still knew which room had once been mine. Room 114C. The door was open, empty now. I stepped inside slowly, sat on the chair beside the bed, same model, just newer upholstery. The same spot Vera once sat, whispering for a doctor to finish me. I touched the window glass, not to trace memories, but to prove to myself I'd outlived them. "I remember everything," I said aloud. And I lived. The moment was quiet. But this time, silence didn't feel like submission. It felt like closure. I stood, straightened my coat, and walked out. A breeze caught the edge of my sleeve as I stepped outside into the crisp air. And the sun was soft against the side of my face. I didn't survive because I stayed quiet. I survived because I listened, then chose when to speak. Sometimes the people who claim to love us the most are the very ones who cause the deepest wounds. But silence doesn't mean weakness, and healing doesn't always need to be loud. What would you do if someone tried to erase your voice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more true-feeling revenge stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter, because some truths are too powerful to stay buried.